What's up, y'all, and welcome to this video. Today I've got a fun one for you. I'm going to be telling you guys all about the Leica IIc, a blast from the past. All right, y'all, let's get into this video. So the Leica IIc is a 35mm rangefinder with a lens screw mount. This camera was produced between 1948 to 1951. This Barnett creation was not in production for very long, as there were only about 11,000 bodies to hit the market in the end. Now, you won't find many of these cameras on eBay, but if you do get lucky enough to come across one, you're looking to spend between $600 and $800 to purchase one in good working condition. I was able to get my hands on this Leica IIc because the sponsor of this video, Walter's Camera Repair, loaned it to me for a month and allowed me to get a feel for old girl. Thanks, you guys. All right, you guys, I'm going to go ahead and throw some sample photos on the screen for you because I know everyone hates to see the photos until the end, so I'm going to sprinkle them throughout the video for you. Here I have some Fuji Superia 400 images I took during the first time that I successfully went out with this camera. The lens I used was a Jupiter 50mm f2 lens. I personally feel this is one of the more affordable ways to get into the Leica system because we all know it's expensive. Now, this video isn't going to be a straight review video. I want you to think of it more as an overview of how to utilize this camera, and then I'll give some opinions later on of some of the pros and cons I discovered while using this camera. So the Leica IIc is mad old, okay? And the biggest differences I found with this camera is how to load it. It's the biggest difference, and it's also the most important difference with this camera. There is a diagram on the bottom of the camera which shows you how you need to prepare your film to load it into the camera. Back then the leads were longer, so you have to pull it out of your canister, and most important part, make sure you cut your lead at an angle, okay? I cannot stress this enough. When I first started loading this camera, I did it incorrectly the first 3 times. And I paid the price the first 3 times because I didn't get any images. And you might be wondering, Talya, how did you mess it up so bad? Why did you cut it wrong when it has a photo on it? Well, I saw the photo and I needed more information. I was having a hard time loading the camera, and I went to YouTube, like you guys are doing right now probably, to see how to do it. And I came across a video of an older model of this camera, and I watched how that person loaded that version. That does not work with this version. You have to cut it at an angle. If you don't, the film will get jammed inside of the canister and it will not advance. And it'll just break your heart, which it did to me 3 times. So, cut it at an angle. Next, make sure you're securing the film tightly under the metal component of the spindle that comes with the camera. You're going to have to be very careful when you're loading your canister and your lead to the component that's supposed to catch your film into the camera. And you want to make sure there is enough tension on there that when you advance your lever, the film is going through seamlessly. The next important part is that once you have it inside of your camera, make sure that the sprockets have picked up the spool, the holes on the side of the film, and that it's advancing, because otherwise you're in for a world of hurt. I know, I speak from experience. Super important. I'm going to show you what I ended up doing to make sure that I had my film loaded correctly. You'll see here that I basically burned a frame by marking it to make sure that when I went to advance the film was actually advancing. I take off the lens so that I can see the film. I put it in bulb mode and I shoot it, mark it, advance it, just to make sure that the film is on the spool, it's taken up, and I'm not going to have any problems. And this is the only way that I have found to make sure that there are no problems and that the film is in fact on the spool correctly and being advanced. Another way you can ensure that your film is advancing correctly is that if you look on top of your camera while you're utilizing it, when you rotate the film advance to the right side, not only is that moving, but so are the other components, including the number counter and the other device to the left of it, to the immediate left of it. You want those things to be moving when you advance your film, and then it will stop when it is ready for the next shot to be taken. All right, another feature of this camera is that it has a double viewfinder. You utilize the right viewfinder to compose your shots, and then you utilize the left viewfinder to get your shots in focus, to focus the shot. Since there are no frame lines inside the camera, you have to keep parallax compensation in your mind. So I was always telling myself to lift the camera just above my subject's head to make sure I wasn't cutting it off, or just above my scene to make sure I was getting everything I wanted in frame. Later on, when I'm showing you more photos, you'll see that I didn't always hit this, because what I wasn't thinking about is making sure I had enough space to the right and to the left. You live and you learn on this one, but these are things you have to be thinking about because you do not have these guidelines, frame lines as it were in this instance. I took the camera out on a photo walk to Venice Beach, and I also did a portrait shoot utilizing this camera as well. So let's jump into that footage right now. all development and scans provided by Walters Camera Repair. If you're in the greater Los Angeles area, consider Walters for all your processing needs. And if you have a camera in need of servicing or repair, make Walters your go-to shop for quality and fair pricing. Website in the description below. And tell them Talya sent you. So as you saw from those clips and samples, the Jupiter 50mm lens produces some incredibly sharp images. And that's what really impressed me the most about using this camera. It's just the quality of the photos that came out. But let's take a closer look at some of these images to get more into some of the difficulties you may face while utilizing the Leica IIc. In this photo, the rim was cut off. I thought I had more of the flower pot in the frame when I was composing this shot. As you can see in the next two photos, I cut off my model's head and a part of his body. Composing on this camera is very tricky and takes a lot of consideration while doing it. So now that I've given you guys a rundown of how to use this camera and you've seen me use it in action, I'm going to give you my personal user experience, pros and cons regarding the Leica IIc. Let's start with the pros because it's just better to get something positive on your palette when you're talking about a camera. Personal opinion. I feel like this camera is fairly priced. Like I said earlier, it's a cheap way to get into Leica. And if you are someone who really wants to get into Leica because you like the system, you like the history of it, this is one of the cheaper cameras that you can buy to get your foot in the door. This camera has a very unassuming and classic look about it. The shutter sound is quite satisfying. I really enjoy it. I like the small quirks of the camera. Like when I advance the film, I like the look of the movement on top of the camera as I'm advancing the film. I think it's cute. This camera is lightweight and easy to carry around. All right, let's jump into my list of cons. The double viewfinder slows down the process of making photos significantly. You have to go from composing your shot, making sure everything is lined up, but really making sure you're within the lines that aren't there so that you're not cutting anything off. And then you have to go to your left viewfinder to make sure that you're in focus. But if you compose your image first in your right viewfinder and then go to the left viewfinder to put it in focus, what you're focusing on there may not be the item that you're looking to focus on. So then I found that I would have to move to focus on, say, an eye or a building or a cup. I don't think I shot a cup, but let's say I did. And then I would go back to the right viewfinder and then recompose, knowing that I had the cup in focus. When I was reading up on this camera and composing, a lot of people said compose first, focus second. But what I found works best for me is compose first, focus, then go back and compose again to make sure that you have the composition that you want. I couldn't imagine just going from composing to focusing and then taking the shot because I've kind of moved to focus on the thing that I had in mind in the first place. Since I was taking 3 steps to take photos, it took so much longer. I was not capturing in-action shots. I was pre-focusing on things and someone happened to walk into my scenes. That was just luck. Or I was just waiting for a really long time, but I didn't always have the patience for that. So I didn't have a lot of people in my shots because the process takes too long. I also don't enjoy not having frame lines. I had a lot of shots that I thought were composed to my liking that turned out not to be, mostly while shooting portraits in the landscape orientation. My model was cut off a lot and that really bummed me out. I didn't know that I didn't have that space to the right because I can't see that inside my viewfinder. But I would have liked to have gotten his shoulders in there, you know. But by far, the most difficult feature of this camera is loading it. Loading this camera was the biggest pain in my heel that I've ever experienced. It was such a pain in the heel that it made me not want to shoot this camera. And that's a problem. No matter what your camera's problems are, you want to shoot the camera. The camera should inspire you to want to create photos. And I just felt that I had had so many failures while trying to load this camera correctly that it made me not want to shoot it because I was wasting rolls of film. It was awful. Honestly, it was an awful experience trying to load this camera. I had planned to shoot more with my model. I had a roll of T-Max and I loaded it while on the set and I advanced it, but I didn't have a pin on me, so I couldn't mark off a frame and burn it to make sure that I had it on there correctly. But I figured since I had the film on the sprockets and when I was advancing it, it was moving, everything was moving, it looked good. I assumed that I had it on there correctly. 36 shots later, I didn't have a thing. That really put me off about this camera. Loading it puts me off so much. It's a shame because I got some gorgeous images utilizing this camera. The images I got on this camera are some of my favorites as far as like just knowing that I can get super sharp images with this setup. But the process of loading the camera turns me off, just completely turns me off. It makes me not want to put myself through it. And I sound like I'm a trauma victim. So you're probably wondering, so Talya, who is this camera for? And I have thought about this a great deal because this camera is not for me. Not at this time in my life. It may be for me in 40, 50 years when I have the patience to take leisurely walks and I'm not in a hurry. I'm really enjoying every single step of taking a photo. This camera is for someone who has the patience to use it. Someone who doesn't mind loading this camera the night before a big day, burning a frame by marking it to ensure that it is loaded properly. Someone who doesn't mind taking a minute or two to compose their shots and then take the photo. This camera is for a photographer who just has the time. And that's not me. But I know there are photographers out there who really want a camera to slow them down even more, who really want a camera that speaks to their spirit. And this camera may really speak to someone else. And I encourage everyone, if they come across this camera, to give it a try. Just because it's not my camera doesn't mean it's not your camera. As you can see, this camera is capable of making some gorgeous images, which is the biggest selling point of this camera in my opinion, more so than it being the cheapest way that I have found to get into Leica. Outside of the free point and shoot I got, that's another video and story, which I've already posted. I hope you guys enjoyed this overview of the Leica IIc. It's a gorgeous camera, a camera from a classic time in history. And let me know what you thought about it in the comments below. Let me know if you have any additional questions regarding this camera, because I noticed there aren't a lot of videos on YouTube specifically about this camera, so don't hesitate to ask me. If you're curious about purchasing this camera, it is currently for sale at Walter's Camera Repair. Link will be in the description below. Tell the guys I said what's up and give this video a like for me. It really helps me out here on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so yet. I'd really love to have you, and I will see you all in the next one. All right, everybody, peace.